Welcome to the Sea Pines Community Coffee for November. My name is Amanda Sutcliffe-Jones. I am the CSA Director of Communications. We appreciate everybody coming out this morning who's attending in person, as well as those who are joining us via webinar wherever they may be located. This morning we do have a large agenda, so I'll jump right in. I will cover my agenda items. You'll hear from David Henderson, our Director of Special Projects and Operations. You also hear from Russell Fredericks, our CSA Director of Maintenance, Toby McSwain, our Director of Safety, Security, and Transportation, and then we'll also hear from Brett Martin, CSA President today. We will take a short 5-minute meeting break to get refreshed, use the restroom, grab a cup of coffee if you'd like to, if you're joining us in person, and then we will resume for question and answer session. Those joining via webinar, you do not see the box on at this time, but once we begin the question and answer session, we will turn on the question box for those joining via webinar, and we encourage you to ask questions in that manner. So we will move on to my agenda items. Quick reminder, if you have a cell phone on, if you're attending in person, please silence it or turn it off if you'd like to. We don't want to interrupt the presenters. Bathrooms are located right to the back of the room, and fire exits are over to the right. Coffee is over to the left if you'd like some. CSA and ASPO Board of Director elections. Ballots have been sent. They were mailed out on November 1st. We have 3 seats open for the CSA Board of Directors. We have 3 seats open for the ASPO Board of Directors elections. Those independent roles begin on January 1st, 2019 for CSA, as well as for ASPO. That's the date they will be seated. CSA and ASPO Board of Director election candidates. You can see on your left-hand side of the screen is your CSA candidates. On the right-hand side of your screen are your ASPO candidates. And those are those people who have appeared on the ballots. A little bit of information about the actual ballot and election process itself. So important dates, like I mentioned, November 1st is the dates that the ballots were mailed. They were mailed to the notice of record of mailing that you have on file with CSA. So what does that mean? If you are a part-timer and maybe you have your primary home is in Naples, Florida, and you're here in Hilton Head for the next 30 days or a couple of months, and you regularly receive mail in Naples, you need to let us know. We don't know where you are geographically during the time of the year, so if you're not at your normal notice of mailing, please contact CSA directly. We will be happy to resubmit you a replacement ballot, and we can get that taken care of for you. December 1st, that is the date that the election ballots are due. They must be postmarked by December 1st as well, and they are returned directly to Elliot Davis. That is our independent CPA who audits the election for us, and they are located in Charleston, South Carolina. There was a blue envelope in your ballots that came to you via mail, and that is where that address is stamped to, which is noted to Elliot Davis. Like I mentioned, replacement ballots. If for some reason you need one of those replacement ballots, you're more than welcome to come into the CSA office, 175 Greenwood Drive. If you need a replacement ballot taken care of in person. If you are not physically located in the Sea Pines or in Hilton Head at this time and need a replacement ballot, you can email us at election@seapinescsa.com. We do not send you back the ballot via email, but what we can do is get the information we need to be able to send it to you via postal mail. So that would be your first and last name, your Sea Pines property address in which you did not receive that ballot for, and then we will determine by your notification the address we need to send it to. And again, it does take 3 to 5 business days for those ballots to arrive once we resubmit a replacement ballot. And again, ballots are distributed via postal mail and cannot be emailed to property owners. Learn more about each of your candidates by visiting our website. It's seapinesliving.com/election candidates. As part of your ballot as well, a Meet the Candidates handout was included, but this is also a repeat of that same information and some additional information as well, including the questions and answers submitted by the candidates from the questions that were given to us from the community. Some upcoming events. Save the date for the ASPO Board of Directors meeting. It's going to be this Thursday, the 8th at 9 a.m. right here in the Sea Pines Community Center. It's open to all Sea Pines property owners. David Henderson, our Director of Special Projects and Operations, will give us some additional information on the Bonfire event that's coming up this Friday. Tickets are still on sale, so get them while you can. The CSA Board of Directors meeting. Please note this change of date and the time. It is now scheduled for November 16th. That is a Friday at 10 a.m. That is just a date change and time change for the November meeting only. Sea Pines Community Coffee, next one will be on December 5th at, that is an incorrect time that I have noted here. It's December 5th at 9 a.m. So apologize for that date error there. Sea Pines Holiday Open House is correct. That's December 11th from 3 to 6 at Tower Beach. I will make that notification change before sending this out for us. Sea Pines CSA holiday hours. We do have some holiday hours coming up. Thanksgiving office hours, you can see those listed there. Our Christmas office hours and our New Year's office hours are listed. Again, those are the CSA Administration Office located at 175 Greenwood Drive. So you may have seen this at the previous coffee that we did last month, but just wanted to remind you guys, it is a great resource that is available. Our staff worked really hard on putting this together for property owners, both current and ones that are joining us for the first time as new property owners. It's the Sea Pines Community Guidebook. What we'll do at the next coffee, our next community presentation, we are going to walk through this very large publication. We're not going to do it today because we have a large agenda, but it's 32 pages of really great resource information for you guys. So we encourage you to take a look at it. A little bit of information about the reference book. You can see our notes here, but seapinesliving.com is where the book is located. It's /community guide, and you can see all the great resources in that book. Jean McElroy, our communications coordinator, will be walking us through that publication in a future presentation. And at this time, I'd like to welcome Marie Sinkowitz. Marie Sinkowitz is our database administrator. Document administrator. Sorry for that, Marie. Marie's going to walk us through another new community resource, and that is something that we did talk about at the last coffee, but just kind of want to walk you guys through it to make sure you really understand how vast and how helpful this resource is for us. So Marie, I will turn it over to you, and that is my last agenda item. Following Marie's presentation, we'll welcome David. So Marie, I'll give you this if you need it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So I started in March of this year with CSA and kind of walked into a lot of legal documentation. I think it's been kind of a big sort of unknown for a lot of people, and we're learning a lot more as the election goes along and as, you know, just times of year go on. So what we did was, we know that it's very, very confusing. So what we tried to do was gather all of the covenants that we're aware of at this point into one large consolidated document. So within our website, and we're going to bring that up for you, we will be able to show you how to actually navigate this large covenant document. There's over 900 pages of, pages of documents, close to, I think it's 932, something like that. So just bear with us as we kind of go through this. We do need your help on this as well. So most of these records do predate CSA. Our records do go back to 1956 when we first started the concept of Sea Pines. So these are covenants, land use documents. They are filed with the Beaufort County Register of Deeds. And I have to say, you're very lucky that we're in Beaufort County, because their records are some of the best that we have in the state of South Carolina. And they have resources that are constantly working to retrieve, scans of documents, try and clean them up, make them more legible. So they've been a wealth of information for us and for me, personally, just learning more about Sea Pines, the history of Sea Pines, and all of the covenants and land use documents that we have to file that have, been on the books with us. So again, just kind of clarifying, these are publicly recorded documents with the Beaufort County Register of Deeds. So when we bring up the resource guide, you'll see that it will have the deed book number and the deed page number that these records actually start with, and that's from Beaufort County. These are not CSA corporate records at all. So CSA may be a party to some of these records. So we just wanted to compile them. We have links of these recorded documents. Again, there's not really regime-specific covenants that are in this unless they're just a party to some of the CSA records. We are trying to compile everything that's been publicly recorded or any regime-specific documents just to help us learn more about the history of CSA. So if we can bring that up, please, to start to navigate it. So I think we've seen this. I think we're going to try and bring the link up now. Thank you, Amanda. So while she's bringing that link up, this actually starts page 2 of the covenant document. So you'll see line by line by line, it starts with the deed book number, again, the deed book page number that it's in there, and then the year that this was recorded. It also has a brief description, what we've been able to gather, of the actual covenant or land use document itself. So when we bring this up, thank you. And obviously, as any kind of covenants happen, any kind of changes to covenants, you know, let's say the last referendum, I think, where we dealt with the Six Oaks Cemetery, that's the last document that we have in here, and that was from 2017. They're 2007, so 2013. Anytime we have any changes, we're going to go in and update this document as well. So as Amanda brings it up, when we go onto the website, we have essentially very descriptive information at the start. What is this document? How do you go about navigating this document? So much like all of the publications or links that we have on our Sea Pines Living website, you simply click on it. It's going to open in a separate window so that you aren't losing where you were on the website itself. It opens in the separate window. You're used to seeing it. Just as we have here, if you look in the upper right navigation, you do have the option to print, and you also have the option of bookmarks. Please, again, use caution when you're printing. Note the page number, you know, that you want to print specifically, or section of pages that you want to print specifically, because you will print out like 932 pages of documents if you aren't exactly careful with that. So again, if those of you who aren't necessarily familiar with using Adobe PDF or launching documents on our website, if you enable the bookmarks, you do have the option of, you'll expand Sea Pines Covenants, and just the way that the pages are linked within here, we have to expand Sea Pines Covenants, the bottom one. Yep, sorry. And then you'll see the link for Index of Covenants. So it depends also on the version of Adobe that you might have on your computer on what your options actually are for your bookmarks. So you'll just simply click on the Index of Covenants, and it launches into the live version that you see here of all of the different documents and the pages. You know, some of them, if you can click on any one of them, Amanda, it's fine. Class A covenants. So it brings it up. You can see this is a much better version of the document than we've had in the past. As I mentioned, the Register of Deeds, we went back and we got about 20 different documents that were a better version of them from the Register of Deeds, and they have teams, and as the technology changes, they can clean it up and scrub it and make it look much more legible. Some of them are still a little bit tough, and we are still working with them. They said, you know, come back in a couple of months, so we're continuing to work through that. But as you go through, you can simply, you know, read through each of the covenants as they come up. If you've read through this one and scroll through a couple of the pages, you just simply go back up to the bookmarks and select on the Index of Covenants, the same place that you clicked again, and it will take you right back up to the index. So if you're scrolling through and look through and say, oh, I want to look at the 74s. I also just want to highlight, I know we are kind of short on time with our large agenda, but I just want to highlight that most of our main major covenants are highlighted in blue. So that would be 1970, 1974, the 88 agreement, and there's one more, 84. Thank you very much, Barry. So all of those are highlighted in blue. Those have been also separated out on our governance pages as well, but you know, simply it's just easily clickable here. We love our 74 covenants. There's a lot of information that's included within this. I know some of them, again, were very hard to read previously. We've gotten better copies with working with the Beaufort County Register of Deeds. So if you have questions, I'll be here at the end with the microphone, happy to answer questions for you. Thank you. And we'll bring up David now. Sorry.
Thank you, Marie. So before we bring David up, just want to thank Marie and thank the staff that's been integral in putting this together. This has been a really big project for us. This is 900 plus pages of a lot of years in sea pines, y'all. So please, if you're interested, please use it. Marie, not only will she be here afterwards, but there is, let me just see if I have it on here. I can't remember. Stephen, will you make sure I'm on the center so I can change the slides for me? Thank you. So if you have comments, questions, concerns, see missing records, email us. Email us is the best way. You can call us as well, 843-671-1343. You can email us at info@csaseapines.com. Really, we want to make sure this is a useful resource for our property owners. So again, thank you to Marie for all your hard work and efforts on that. At this point, we'll bring David Henderson up, our Director of Special Projects and Operations, to cover his slides. David.
Thank you, Amanda, and good morning. A lot of this material, if you regularly attend the copies, will be familiar to you, but we do have some good updates, particularly as we start with beach and boardwalk post-storms that I wanted to discuss with you. This photo is a great illustration of some of the challenges that the Beach Trust and CSA and oceanfront owners are facing, specifically as it relates to boardwalks. Russell Fredericks took this picture, and again, it's a really good example. And so what you can see, this is CSA beach walk number 20. And you can see where the existing beach walk ends. Town fencing has gone in post-storm. Excuse me, town vegetation has gone in post-storm. And it's working. So you can see that there's a primary dune that is beginning to form, which is exactly what we want to happen. We had a multi-tiered dune system that was a result of decades of active beach management by the town prior to Hurricane Matthew. And in some areas of sea ponds, it was removed. And in some cases in sea ponds, not only was all that removed, some of the private property was eroded away as well. So this is the beginning of the recovery process. So we've known for a while that as that happened, it would present challenges for owners of boardwalks, again, CSA and private owners. The purpose of a boardwalk is to help get foot traffic off of the dune so that this vegetation can grow, the sand can be stabilized, and it can grow over time. This is our protection from storms. What we have now is that as conditions have changed and it's beginning to recover, the boardwalks are not long enough. And you can actually see the footprints if you're up close where people are using the boardwalk and walking over what is now beginning to be the primary dune. If this were to continue, what you would see is there would be no vegetation that would be established where the foot traffic is. You would see a cut from the foot traffic over time in that dune, and that boardwalk would not be there to protect the dune. If we ever did have a future event and had a storm surge associated with it, that's where the storm surge would come in. So the Beach Trust is owned by the Sea Pines Forest Preserve Foundation. And there is a policy in place, and the Forest Preserve trustees at yesterday's meeting did approve some changes to the existing policy. We are formalizing that and will be in a position very soon for those that are desiring to rebuild their boardwalks. One of the essential changes in the policy from the previously existing was that boardwalks will now be required when they are rebuilt to extend to the seaward toe of the primary dune, which is the best practice. So in this specific case, that boardwalk would be extended to just beyond where that second row of fencing is. And it has to be a certain height above the dune as required by the town and the state, still has to be approved by the ARB, but it will have to extend to the seaward toe of the primary dune. If at any point in the future, conditions continue to change and that boardwalk, which may have been perfectly acceptable at the time that it went in, but at any point in the future, if we have a scenario where it begins to compromise the integrity of the dune, adjustments may be necessary. I spoke last meeting about Tower Beach specifically, in which our existing boardwalks 13 and 14 were perfectly installed to code and approved at the time, original time they went in. But due to these changes, the ends of those boardwalks now, instead of protecting those dunes, are actually compromising them. So those are something that we would hope to be able to adjust to get back to where we need to in the future. All right, we're going to switch to the Forest Preserve. We are almost done 2 years later with Hurricane Matthew cleanup in the Forest Preserve. We used in many areas a logger to do a salvage harvest of dead, down, and affected trees. And in some areas, we were not able to get the logger to work, and we were able to use some mechanical clearing machinery. Most recently, we completed along Greenwood Drive behind parking lots 1 and 2. I showed you this before and after at last month's meeting. The reference point for you, this is lot 1, is that piece of concrete right there. Is that piece of concrete right there. So there's a before and after. A couple of things I'd like to point out in this picture is we have an invasive exotic, the Chinese tallow tree, which is something that we would rather not have. It's no longer there. And just invasive vines. Invasive vines. Vines have always been a challenge for us, just not in the Forest Preserve, but in our open spaces. I suggest suspect that in your yard you have challenges at time with vines. They need sunlight. And so you would typically see them along edges. Post-storm, with all the additional trees that came down, all that additional sunlight that's hitting the ground, vines are growing in places that they never grew before. And over time, they can actually kill the tree that they're growing on. They can become so invasive. There we go. So this is lot 2. This is a new photo for you to look at. Your reference point is the power pole there with lot 2 on it. So what you saw in the before condition, 2 things, just invasive vines, choking vines. You cannot even see through the edge. It's so impenetrable. We had a lot of tree fall damage in lot 2 as a result of Matthew. All of this daylight that you're seeing in here, prior to Hurricane Matthew, you would not see daylight there. You would have seen trees. You can see the after on the right. And I'll point out that you'll see several mounds that remain behind. What those are the root balls from trees where they had been blown over, and we were able to mechanically clean up all the woody material, but the root ball that has a lot of soil mixed in with it, we were not able at that time to use the machinery to clean it up. I encourage you, now that Greenwood Drive's open, when you have an opportunity to go out there and to look at these areas. It's important to note that these photos were taken in the last few weeks. But if I were to go out and take another after photo, and if you were to scrutinize it closely, you would see that changes have already begun to occur. Stuff has already begun to grow back. Nothing ever stays the same. And Mother Nature and habitat is the same way. So realizing this, what are we going to do about it? Well, for the Forest Preserve, we have developed a land management plan. Essentially what we're talking about is managing ecological succession. And perhaps one of the best ways I could explain it is if you stopped maintaining your yard and came back a year later, and then 2 years later, and 3 years later, what those natural changes would be. Aesthetically, you wouldn't like it. You probably couldn't see across your yard. It would be so thick. Another good example that comes to mind, if some of you may remember years ago, Rose Hill, when their golf course went fallow for some years, and you could see it from 278, and it went from manicured golf course to impenetrable jungle. That's succession, and you have to manage it if you want to meet your management objectives. I think that'd make a great bumper sticker. Succession happens. I think there's something out there similar, but that's my bumper sticker. So we have a plan in place, and the overall objective is to view the Forest Preserve as a single contiguous ecological unit and use established land management practices to promote and maintain habitat and wildlife diversification and multiple outdoor recreation opportunities. So when you're managing wildlife, what you do first is you manage habitat. You manage the habitat, the wildlife follow. As a general rule with wildlife management, the more diverse the habitat, the more diverse the species of wildlife that can occupy it. So what are some specific things that we've done here just recently? I talked about the mechanical clearing that we used in lots 1 and 2. That was done mostly with what is called a gyrotrack machine. It's a size of about a small tank. It's able to go out and mechanically clear just about anything that is out there. We also have begun using selectively herbicides. And on the right, you'll see a 4-wheel off-road tractor, if you will, with a spray tank on it. And so we are able to selectively apply herbicides to get us to our objectives. So specifically what we're doing now is we're looking at invasive exotics, Chinese tallow trees, hardwoods, particularly sweet gums, a lot of other early successional material, dog fennel. If you're familiar with dog fennel, that's something that will come back. So this is a process that we have begun and that we will continue to do going forward to meet that objective that I shared with you earlier. Switch over to the Forest Preserve. Amanda touched on it earlier. Just wanted to let you all know again that our 2019 calendar is available. You have 2 options. You can purchase it, a retail purchase at CSA for $10, or today and today only, it's 2 for $20. You can also contribute $75 or more to your annual drive solicitation letter that you should have received by now. We are getting checks in. That is the single largest source of revenue for the Forest Preserve Foundation. I mean, we rely almost entirely on the generosity of you and others to do what we do out there. If you have not received a letter, please let us know and we will get you one. But we really wish that you would give us some consideration to allow us to do the things that we're trying to do out there. Amanda talked about the bonfire. It's Friday. We still have tickets available. It would strongly encourage you to try to attend. It's a great event. I believe this is our 7th or 8th annual. It's at Fish Island. It's this Friday from 4:30 to 7:30. The Salty Dog is providing all of the food to no charge to the Forest Preserve. We have the menu available on a flyer that's been sent out to you electronically. It's a very diverse, what I like to think of as a critter-centric menu, but take a look at it and I think you'll like what you see. We'll have a full open bar. We'll also have non-alcoholic beverages. We'll have entertainment, and Fish Island is a wonderful setting, and hope that you can join us on Friday. I'll end with Six Oaks. We do have our Wreaths Across America program coming up. It is Saturday, December 5th at 12 noon. If you've never attended one of these ceremonies, I encourage you to do so. It's a remembrance event. It's just a very patriotic event. It just leaves you with a good feeling. I've been to the last several. You will have the opportunity to sponsor a wreath and to, even if you don't, to come to the event at Six Oaks and to place a wreath. We will place a wreath on every veteran's grave in Six Oaks Cemetery. Again, that is Saturday, December 15th at noon. And lastly, I'll leave you with the inventory. We do have additional inventory in Six Oaks, and if it's something that it is something that none of us want to consider or to contemplate, but if you do think there's a possibility that you may want to be in Six Oaks, I would encourage you to take advantage of some new inventory that has just recently become available. I think it is some of the best value with full or partial views of the Six Oaks in the back. Again, it's something that I think you, if you think you may want to consider being there to take advantage of that. With that said, I'll turn it over to Russell, and I appreciate your attention. Thanks.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. Amanda, how many do we have on the webinar? Oh, great. Well, I almost thought I need to reserve a spot in Six Oaks if Greenwood Drive wasn't open before this weekend, quite frankly. I also was asking Toby to give this presentation today as in my place, but I am glad to be here and update everyone on Greenwood Drive. As we all know, the road is now open from Club Course Drive to Governor's Road. And I just want to present this morning some of the highlights of the project and things that we encountered out there, and some of the construction details. Well, as we all heard in many other presentations, Sea Pine's infrastructure and drainage is in great disrepair in many areas. And Greenwood Drive was one of them, as these very old aluminum pipes were extremely brittle. You could actually stick any sort of a probe into these pipes, and they absolutely just crumbled instantaneously in taking these out. So with many of our roadways throughout Sea Pines, this exists in most areas. The issue is the roadways over the top of these crumbling pipes. So moving forward, through our strategic plan, I think it's really crucial that we have the funding to be able to do this in many other roads as we approach this construction. If we were to simply overlay Greenwood Drive versus what we did, more than likely that we would have to come back in a very short amount of time to repair these areas, as these pipes would indefinitely fail and fail again, causing other delays in roadway closures. So I just want to underscore that. I know Brett's going to be speaking later in the presentation about referendum, but again, these are really, really important aspects of our community here in Sea Pines, and that we really need to invest the funding and to rebuild these roads the right way. So here's some of the new drainage that we installed. 2,600 linear feet of drainage pipe. Again, all the old drainage was in great disrepair. With this new drainage, we have perforated pipe that was installed, a lot of new catch basins adjacent to the roadway to take water off the road into the nearby lagoon system. So again, this was all engineered in advance, and a good part of this project financially was the drainage. Again, some more drainage photos. A lot of these crossings are on Greenwood Drive from perpendicular to the road, bringing water from the Governor's Lane side of Greenwood Drive to the trolley lot side. Most of these crossings did not exist before, and there was not a way for water to efficiently transport from one side to the other. So again, this really improves the drainage efficiency on Greenwood Drive. And something, again, we would like to do this on many other roads throughout Sea Pines. North Sea Pines Drive, matter of fact, needs this same sort of a treatment desperately in the upcoming years. Road widening, and I just want to clarify, the road widening is essentially where the existing curbing was before. And this area provides some easier and safer travel on the road, making the road a bit more comfortable. Essentially, the road's about the same overall width as it was, but again, this is where the curb existed on both sides of the road. And as we've discussed many times, that curbing was holding water on the road, causing the roadway to deteriorate much faster. The leveling course of the roadway was an extensive operation. This base material was essential to stabilize this road base, as we worked closely with our geotech engineers on this to make sure this was installed properly underneath this roadbed, and again giving this roadway extended life for many years to come. Some additional photos of demolition work. This is the removal of the curbing, and well over 2 miles of curb was removed in this particular section of Greenwood Drive. So quite an undertaking in a very short period of time. Curbing installation, and I've received some questions about curbing. Why do we put some back? And it has to do with the grading on the road. The existing grades on the golf course, Sea Pines Country Club's side of the roadway, so there's some elevation issues there. In order to transport water from one side of the road to another, it was necessary to install curbing on both sides, as well as those catch basins that you saw earlier, again, to bring water to the trolley lot side of the roadway. roadside grading, in which we still have a ways to go. I want to make one comment about this. One of the things that we encountered out here was substantial irrigation that was abandoned in place for the last probably 25 or 30 years. There was probably well over 2 or 3 miles of irrigation pipe that was simply abandoned over the years. Don't know why. It seems like maintenance probably stopped at some point. But again, most of that irrigation pipe was removed as part of the project. Many of these areas, as we know, are in the deep shade. We would like to landscape some of these areas in the future. Again, it's a real issue for us to make this roadway aesthetically pleasing, and we do need the funding to accomplish that. And just a few more photos of the surface course, which we just finished at the end of last week, as we just before opening the roadway over the weekend. And then the last part of the project recently was the roadway striping, and this is just temporary striping. We have a ways to go with some other activities out there. Again, this is a very temporary measure to get the roadway open and to traffic. Just want to point out some other aspects of the project. And you'll notice coming in Greenwood Drive, there's an acceleration lane on the right side that did not exist before, that we had to remove some sod in that area. But we have been able to establish some areas now that we could establish lawn and some plantings, and this happens to be by the trolley lot. And you can see here in this left-hand photo, there was extensive ditch that was there before. So again, folks arriving into Sea Pines for the first time and going into the trolley lot, we plan to install some new lawns and some modest landscaping as part of the work that we'll be doing in the coming weeks in these areas. But again, just wanted to point that out. Okay, so just a quick update, and I think you've seen some of this, the announcement Amanda sent out over the weekend. We have additional construction work to do, landscaping, turf and irrigation installation, and areas that weren't irrigated before, mulch and pine straw application, permanent line striping, crosswalk stamping, reflective marker. So again, this work is going to be going on through January, I expect at this point. All right, so just wanted to provide everyone an update on phase 2, what we refer to as phase 2, from Governor's Road to Plantation Drive. At this time, we're postponing that work to a future date, given the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up. We do not want to undertake any other construction work at this time. We just feel it's prudent not to start that. We're looking at a couple scenarios, one for possibly next spring and possibly a future date beyond that. So again, we do not want to take on any other construction work at this time. Other aspects of phase 2 are similar to phase 1. Drainage improvements, stabilizing the roadbed. There's a portion of the leisure trail that we have to rebuild, installing new pedestrian vehicular guardrails. And then as part of the project, right by the Lawton outfall, we'll be installing a historic rice trunk, which you see in many other properties in the Low Country. And this is something that ARB has already approved. Okay, Sea Pines timber bridges, making excellent progress down there. We have hoped to have most of this completed by Thanksgiving. 2 bridges are mostly complete at this point. We're just waiting on our stainless steel cabling that's going to be installed horizontally on each bridge, and then we'll be performing some asphalt work, hopefully next week as the weather allows. The existing bridge was in terrible shape. And there's some other areas around Sea Pines where we need to make these same efforts to improve existing infrastructure. There's many other bridges that need the same attention. And as part of this project, we were able to identify some funding to replace this bridge. And I could tell you firsthand from being on the bridge when we were performing the demolition, this bridge was in pretty rough shape. So again, we're hoping to have all this, including this bridge that we're working on now, mostly complete by Thanksgiving. And for anyone who did not receive the announcement, we have a temporary detour in place. We're working on this bridge, and that's from North Sea Pines Drive going up Governor's Lane to the intersection of Old Military Road and back down South Sea Pines Drive. Quick update on the Deer Island Bridge. We've finally made our way through the permitting process. I have all permits in hand at this point. We are in communication with our contractors to determine a work schedule. Some of the work might be able to occur from before the holidays, but more than likely the bridge repairs will probably be after the first of the year at this point. Again, given the timing of Thanksgiving and Christmas, we don't want to end up in a situation where we have half the bridge torn up around the holidays. North Sea Pines Leisure Trail widening. We have presented this to Safety and Security already, as well as our MAMP committee. We are looking to widen the leisure trail from Sea Pines Beach Club to Beach Lagoon Road by approximately 4 feet. This is really due to the confluence of bikes and pedestrians in this area. It's heavily trafficked. Most days, if you're down there, you can't even walk down this leisure trail in the summer months. So again, this is a project that we're looking to hopefully complete before the end of the year, again, widening this leisure trail and possibly doing some modest landscaping in the area. Audubon Pond landscape replacements. This is a project, and when I first started, that Brett and I identified, and all these old rotted railroad ties around Sea Pines are a real eyesore, and these are some small improvements that we really look to make. Again, moving forward, we could use additional funding for making more of these replacements, but both sides of Audubon Pond had these old rotted railroad ties. We took all that out, took all the landscaping and made some modest improvements, again, with very simple landscaping in these areas, plant material that's drought tolerant, that we're not going to have to really water a whole bunch. But again, if you're heading towards South Beach, again, you'll see these areas, and again, in my mind, a huge improvement for not a lot of cost. Gold Point, same thing. Old rotted railroad ties, both sides of the leisure trail. This landscape bed here was problematic, always full of leaves, weeds, and trucks driving over the edges of it. And again, here we're almost done with the landscaping, but you can see we did a whole bunch of regrading, took out the old rotted railroad ties, and you could see really a much improved look in this area going towards South Beach, as these areas desperately needed this attention. So other projects that we're working on, the town of Hilton Head is currently performing drainage repairs on Spotted Sandpiper. They're hoping to complete that work within the next week or so. Leisure trail and roadway repairs are ongoing throughout this fall into right through the holidays. Our infamous flower changeout is in progress. Interesting enough, there's been a lot of folks coming down there, and for the first time, I've seen a lot of people coming on their bikes and filling up their baskets on their bikes and driving away with flowers. So that was a first for me this time around. I hope she made it home okay. And then mulching and pine straw, selecting open spaces that is upcoming throughout Sea Pines. One of the areas that we'll be focused on is obviously Greenwood Drive, remulching and pine strawing those areas along the roadway. And of course, the holiday lighting, we're currently installing our holiday lights at Fraser Circle, Sea Pine Circle, and some other select locations, the gates and so forth. We plan on turning on those holiday lights the day after Thanksgiving. So with that, I just want to wish everyone a happy and safe Thanksgiving season coming up. And I'm ecstatic that Greenwood Drive is reopened, as I couldn't be happier at the moment. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Mr. Toby McSwain. Toby. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm glad that Greenwood Drive is back open as well. And just a reminder, the speed limit is still 35, not 55. I know it's nice and smooth, but we were out there this morning and people are clipping along through there at a good pace. And with the speeding, please, by all means, monitor, do us a favor, monitor your speed, because I can't tell you whether you're going to get a warning or a trip to the court. And if you are unfortunate to get a trip to the court, do not, under any circumstances, show up to the courtroom with your bathing suit and flip-flops on, because the judge will ask you to leave the courtroom. So I've got some property owners that unfortunately have received some tickets, and they were dismissed at the court because they showed up like they were going to the beach. So with that in mind, if you don't speed, you don't have to worry about going there. Just a couple of quick announcements. We do have the holiday seasons coming up, and we ask please use caution. Did our newsletter go out yet, Amanda? I know I made a reference that that there's not a lot of spring chickens left in sea pines, and I mean that in a good way. Please don't climb on your house to hang your lights if you're not able to do so. As of this year to date, EMS has made 101 trips inside of sea pines. And that's from that's slip and falls, that's climbing on your roof to rake the pine straw off. You know, if you can't climb your steps, you shouldn't climb on your roof. That's a rule, I think. So somewhere it's a rule, but so please use caution, hire someone to help you out with that. Safety wise and things going on inside of sea pines, we're still quiet. We have had 2 thefts that occurred and both were in cars left unlocked. Here in the last month, we've had 2 cases where our property owners have video surveillance at their home. They have videotaped people walking around their home. One was a little strange. One was a woman dressed in her bathing suit. It was a beachfront home, pulling on the door handle. And we don't know if she was lost, turned around. Nothing was stolen in these 2 cases, just that there's videotapes of people walking around someone's home. These were property owners that live somewhere else full time. So please, you are calling and we do appreciate that. So be mindful, make sure that don't leave your car unlocked in your driveway, even if it's just for a short period of time. Keep it locked up. But right now things are going really good. I just want to touch on a couple things. If you hire someone to come in to provide whatever service it is, you can't call a pass-in for them. They're required to either pay at the gate or they have to buy a commercial decal. So it's not, don't call in a pass for your landscaper, because all you're going to do is get him or her in trouble. With the landscaping, and I've received a couple of phone calls from the property owner that's upset. If we catch a commercial person that's servicing sea pines doing something illegal or doing something against CSA rules and regulations, we put them on a notice of trespass. And what that means to them, they don't get to come back into sea pines and do business anymore. So if your landscaper takes your debris and go dumps it on someone else's property, we're going to put them on a notice of trespass. They don't get to come work in sea pines anymore. So that's the policy. That's the way it is. So if you hire someone, especially the landscapers, they've got to take the debris to the pit. Make sure that you tell them. If they go to Wexford and clean up a yard in Wexford, do not bring that debris to sea pines to our pit. That is the fastest way to get thrown out of sea pines. We don't tolerate it. We don't want someone else's debris. We don't take our crap somewhere else. So tell your landscaper, if they clean your yard up, we offer them the best service that there is. We give them a place where they can go and drop it and not have to drive to Ridgeland, to the landfill to drop that debris off. But we want it in the right location. So please pass that on to your service providers. With the holidays, please use caution. The scams. I just read this morning that there was a guy knocking on doors, claiming to be a pastor asking for money. It's your money. Be very mindful of who you hand your check or your money out to, because they create a scam for everything. And it seems like the holiday seasons, though, that type of activity seems to pick up quite a bit. If you're driving for the holidays, please use caution. The roadways are going to be full, especially the shopping areas. Don't go on your Christmas shopping and leave everything visible inside the car, because the sheriff's office will start working car break-ins where they're popping a window, grabbing stuff off your front seat, and then they're gone. The fires, I don't know if we're going to get to a season where you can actually have a fire outside. It's so hot outside right now, but be cautious if you have an outdoor fireplace. With that, please use caution. The ATMs, I had a meeting Monday with the FBI. The ATMs are still getting hit where they're putting a device on the ATM to be able to record your stuff. Be very cautious about that, and you've got to look for it. But if you're using an ATM, make sure that you pay attention that there's not something over the device of the ATM. If your banking institution should provide you with a fraud alert to your account, and I'm sure that this is a matter of public knowledge, but a friend of mine who's in law enforcement, his wife got a notice from the state of Virginia where she went through a toll. They live in Columbia, South Carolina, went through a toll, and the toll was not paid. And had a description of the car along with the tag, and his wife someone had taken her identity, went to a car dealership, purchased a car, and got it registered in her name. In addition, has 3 credit cards. Now this person's probably in jail now, I'm sure. But if your banking institution, if you have credit cards, ATMs, or whatever, you should have some type of fraud alert on your account. So make sure that someone's monitoring your stuff. Now, sometimes it's kind of a pain if you go out of town and you try to use your ATM card and they lock it down because they think someone stole it. But you take a lot of the services is a free service from your banking institution. So please take advantage of it. Parties for the holiday season. Everybody loves a great party. God knows I do. You gotta use Uber, call a taxi. Every year we have DUI arrests and C-Pines, and it starts right before the Thanksgiving season. It goes through the end of the new year. Don't chance it. It's not worth it. Take an Uber, and that includes your guests. Don't invite your guest over and get them sloshed and let them drive out of your driveway. So please help us with that, because every year, there's not a year that doesn't go by that we have some, I got to tell you, I never really talk about the DUIs that we have in C-Pines. We have some really good ones in here. To the point, coming in the wrong side of Greenwood Drive at the main gate and the wrong lane coming into C-Pines, DUIs. So please, it's not worth it. Wildlife. We're still continuing to have issues with our wildlife. The raccoons will always be a problem. I would venture to say we probably have thousands of raccoons in C-Pines. If you have a garbage can, when you go to Walmart, buy you a $5 bungee cord or get a big brick, put something on your can. They're very skillful, and David and I had this conversation. They'll probably figure out a way to get that big brick off. But just don't put the lid on it, because they're going to constantly come back. And with that, with the wildlife removal, if you have a nuisance and we come, the animal's euthanized. We're not allowed to take that animal and go make it somebody else's problem. So I just want that's state requirement. That's our fur bearer permit. That's what the requirement is. So if you lock it down, maybe it'll make them go to the neighbor's house, create the mess. But raccoons are still a problem. We've had 2 animals attacked by alligators. Do not let your pets near the water. You're asking for, these are hunters. They're looking for a meal. A dog in the water is, that's prime opportunity. And we've had 2 really serious attacks so far with animals in the waterway. So don't let them get near the water. If you live near some CSA right-of-way common space that's near your property, we're developing an application. Our legal team has it now, where we're requiring the utility companies, that would be a Hargray or Spectrum, whoever's digging in a CSA right-of-way, they have to come to our office to get an application before they begin digging in CSA right away. So if a week ago, if you had the opportunity to ride down the South Sea Pines Drive where a cable company dug 5-foot hole deep holes right next to the edge of our pavement on the CSA right away, it was a mess, and they had one flag person down there, all that comes to a stop. We're not allowing that to happen anymore. The utility companies have a right to dig in the right of way and bring you the service, but we want to make sure that they have flagmen, that the job site looks like it does when they leave, because it's like a bull in the china shop. They're pushing pipe through and they're drilling through water mains. It's washing the roadway out. We do have repairs now from a company that did work in Club Course, got to come back and repair the roadway because they tore it up. So if you got a issue, we don't care if the Spectrum or Hargray is digging from the roadside to your home, but if it's in CSA right away, they're required to have an application, and we should have that process finalized here very soon. And my last note, on November the 11th at 1 o'clock in the afternoon at Oyster Factory Park in Bluffton, the Society for Suicide Prevention is having a walk. Unfortunately, in CSA, in the last 2 years, we have lost 3 people to suicide. So if you would like to participate in the walk, and I know that many of the CSA employees are going to participate, or make a donation, you can contact me. We have a team. We're going to walk starting at 1 o'clock at Oyster Factory Park. And I'm not exactly sure. I'm not a Bluffton guy. You know what that is? Oyster Factory Park, David? Okay, all right. That's where it will start and end. 1 o'clock, and I think the 11th is a Sunday. So that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Morning, everybody. I just want to start out by, reminding Toby that I've seen him lately after a tennis match, and he's not a spring chicken either. Just so everybody knows, got a little gray in the beard too. How many people here live on Governor's Road or off of Governor's Road on a road that you have to use Governor's Road to get in and out of Sea Pines? I'm sorry. We're happy to have Greenwood Drive open. Thank you for your patience. We appreciate it. I think it's well worth it. It went fairly well, but I know that we had specific circumstances that were not ideal. And again, just thank you for your patience. Marie was up here earlier talking about what we've been doing from documents. I would like to just tell you what I walked into 4.5 years ago. Many of you probably know a little lady named Jeannie Pierce. Well, when I came here 4.5 years ago, Jeannie showed me the documents and the document rooms. And we had one that was locked that had, really vital documents, but other documents that we needed. And we have a room of documents that looks somewhat like walking into the Library of Congress. And they were all on paper. So we have been steadily working to get what we showed you today, an accurate electronic library of our information so that we can do our jobs primarily, but that also so that you can have this information and access to the really critical recorded documents. And Marie has been doing a great job doing that. She's also a great resource for us when we need to research and try to find some of these things that are out there, because it is a myriad of documents. I mean, she mentioned 1,000 pages of recorded covenants. That doesn't even get to the tip of the iceberg of the documents when you consider all the corporate records and of CSA by itself, but as well as many, many historical documents for Sea Pines. But thank you to Marie, and she's fascinating. She knows a lot of stuff. If you want to talk to her afterwards, she'll be up here for you. Referendum. Want to talk a little bit about the referendum and the status of where we are. And I know Amanda gave me this thing, so I'll see if I can make it work. Again, the process was adoption and approval of the strategic plan, which has been done. We've been communicating the reason for the needs. I'll remind you a little bit of that today. Where does the money go? goes towards those needs. Where's the money come from? Talk a little bit about that as well. The referendum, the initial terms, which is really where the money comes from. Education process and feedback. What do you think? You know, the feedback is coming back from you. We will be launching a survey, an initial survey at least, in the next few days, probably next week, maybe end of this week, to you to kind of tell us where you stand on this right now. And then we'll take that information back to the board and the Sea Pines Resort and agree to go forward, revise, or rethink. We may do an additional survey if we need some clarifications on some things. Okay, then we'll finalize the referendum and bring it out for a vote. What are the issues? Roadways, Russell talked about it. We have a myriad of roadway problems throughout Sea Pines. You know, and in conjunction with that, we have a myriad of drainage and stormwater issues throughout Sea Pines. You know, they kind of go hand in hand, not necessarily directly, but throughout Sea Pines, we've got lagoons that are full. They need to be dredged. See if I can get this to work. We have pipes that are clogged. We have banks that have eroded into those lagoons to clog them up and then to go further into the pipes. We need a lot of work. Here's examples of roots growing into our pipe systems. Here's a grate that we uncovered that had been covered for who knows how long, 10, 20 years. And we are finding them now because we're starting to outline what our system was at one time and what it should have been. And it's a lot of work and it's taking a lot of time, but we think we have a good plan to address it. Trees, as well as landscape. We've got areas of landscaping needs throughout Sea Pines. Russell just talked about a couple of these along. This is one of the ones that we repaired recently where we've taken out the railroad ties that have been there probably 30 years and have deteriorated over that time period and are literally falling apart. We've got landscaped areas and we've fixed a lot of the ones along some of the primary roadways, not all of them, but we've fixed several of them. But when you start to get into the 5,000 acres that is Sea Pines and you start to look at the condition of the roads and the landscaping, it's suffered. Traditionally, and Russell just spoke a little bit about what's happened over the years on Greenwood Drive. You know, the practice was to abandon and move on. And that's what we have traditionally done on some of these issues that are out there. And we have a lot of issues. Storm damage to our trees. We have aging trees. We have not managed these trees much. We've just let the vines grow. And Matthew certainly brought a lot more opportunity for that to happen. Traffic control. Okay, this was the #1 issue. Again, just as a reminder, we've got a plan to make this a lot better. Not everybody likes the plan. I don't think that I've got 100% agreement from everybody at any time on anything in Sea Pines, but we know we have an issue. I think everybody has agreed to that, and we have a plan to address that issue to make this significantly better than it is today, but it will require funding. Where does the money go? It goes to those things: stormwater, tree storm repairs, mitigation, technical upgrades, NetSuite and ABI. We're talking about communication and setting up information systems. This very meeting that we are now doing via webinar, we're still recording, getting these pieces of information out to the greater community beyond the folks that sit in this room every month. Roadways, stormwater and dredging, tree storm repairs and mitigation. You know, they're in different categories because we have some as operating services and some are as major repairs and projects. A lot of what we have to do in stormwater is just going out and cleaning stuff out. I mean, it's not a major repair or replacement in a capital perspective. It's just a big job. Gate reconfiguration, landscape replenishment along primary corridors. You know, in our 7-year plan, we're just touching on the primary corridors. Actually, most of that is just along Greenwood Drive, North Sea Pines Drive, the primary entrances, where we want to spend a good deal to try to create a much better experience coming into Sea Pines. But this will continue on for years. Many people have asked me, well, does this go away? These are 20 and 30-year project plans. They don't end at the end of 7 years. They go on for a long, long time. We didn't get into this position in a short period of time. We got into it over a series of years and abandonments. And then safety initiatives, to continue to look at things like widening a beach walk where we have excessive traffic, where we have lots of people crossing streets, putting a leisure trail on the other side of the street so you don't have to cross that street. Some simple ones. Includes also our ability to manage the traffic at the gate and those folks that are coming in. I mean, Toby's talked about, folks that violate rules. We need to be able to identify them and track them, and we'll be able to do that for our commercial folks that are coming in here much better once we get a new system in place. And then also we have to fund the other things that we have other than the roads that are already on our reserve, like buildings and structures and signs. Total is about $5.5 million a year average is what we think this is going to be. What we currently have is about almost $3 million a year. So we're short about $2.5 million a year. And we're offering to you the opportunity to fix that. And that's what a referendum is about, is for you to vote to tell us, that these are priorities for you to get done. Where we are, we remain the second lowest residential assessment on Hilton Head Island for the oldest community on Hilton Head Island. We have no transfer fee. We are one of 3 that has no transfer fee. I know that Palmetto Hall has initiated a transfer fee in a vote referendum in Palmetto Hall. I don't know the status of that, but we are one of the few that does not have a transfer fee. And the only one with a lower assessment than Sea Pines has a transfer fee, and that's Shipyard. Proposed terms, the Sea Pines Resort to increase its annual assessment by 50%. Commercial tenants will commit to an assessment fee increase of 100%. The real estate transfer fee for all property owners, including residential, commercial, and resort, of 0.5%. And then residential property owner assessment increase of $300 or 29%. That gets us the money to cover the shortfall and provides us with additional revenue of about $365,000, where we can hopefully rebuild our reserves back up to the point where they need to be. After a referendum, if we were to get the increase, and this is in 2018 numbers, we would be at $1,350, and we would still be the second lowest residential assessment on Hilton Head Island. Okay, and this is a terrible picture. I apologize for that. I had a feeling this would show up like that. Can we hit some lights, maybe? This is what happens if we don't. Okay, in our strategic plan, we've identified all these needs. There's $17 million worth of projects here that are going to come out. This is what's probably going to be recommended. Actually, this is what finance is recommending to the board next week. We'll have an interesting board meeting, I'm sure, because we don't have a referendum. So we have to pull a lot of stuff out. Okay. In addition to that, we're taking out an additional $200,000 a year from our operating budget so that we can get to a point where we have a reserve balance in 7 years that equals what we believe is a practical and modest balance. So a lot of stuff. This includes dredging equipment, dredging operations, all that stuff I showed before is pretty much coming out all the way down. These safety initiatives, as well as some trail extensions, gate configuration. We will push out beyond 2025, I think, is what our plan is right now. And, until we get future funding, that would probably go away. Okay, so again, you're going to decide, what you want. That's the initial draft of a 7-year plan. You'll hear more about it probably at the board meeting, those of you who attend. I would anticipate that some future time, we're going to still have to address some of these things, which means other services may have to go away. And those are determinations that the future boards of Sea Pines and CSA are going to have to make a determination on. So that's the information and what we lose if we don't move forward with the referendum. Okay, lights, please. We're going to take a quick break. I think I'm there, right? Okay, 5 minutes, and then we'll come back for Q&A. Okay, if we could take our seats. Just a reminder to staff, if you do have a question that's addressed to you, please get a microphone to respond. Okay. Amanda and David are going to have microphones to come around with, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And again, David, Russell, Toby, or anybody else that needs to respond, make sure you have a microphone.
I have one
And
comment.
if you would, wait for the microphone before you ask your questions.
So just a quick reminder, if you are on the webinar, we are about to turn on the function of asking questions. So you'll see that comments box appear. As a secondary reminder, if you're joining us via webinar and you are on a cell phone, I don't have my cell phone here currently, but you should be able to swipe right or left. So swiping right should show you the video, swiping left should show you the slides. Again, if you're joining us via I believe a tablet or a laptop or desktop computer, you can adjust the scale of which you see the video presentation block versus the slide presentation block. So just keep that in mind when you're viewing via webinar, if that might help you. So we'll move to the next slide. And I'll turn on the question and answers for webinar, and we will moderate that as well.
Tell me when you're ready.
Give me one quick second.
Okay. Back in the back.
Oh, sorry. Just have you identify yourself too as well. Linda Fahrenkopf. The ASPO, this has nothing to do with what happened today, but the ASPO board meeting tomorrow, and I see Barry's here, so maybe he can answer this, has on the agenda the approval of the new bylaws from as of the day as today's date. And I don't know, are those just a draft that will then go out to us for more input, or what? Barry, can you answer that? Thank you.
Charlie's not here, so I'm not sure, but my assumption is it's a draft. For those of you that were at the last ASPO meeting, and I think you were there, right, Linda? Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think it was the whole issue is that there are still a number of revisions that need to be made to the bylaws. I'm assuming it's just keeping the issue out there that they obviously need to be completed, at some point. But other than that, I don't know any more about it. Okay, good.
Hi, I'm Dave Borghese, and I was on the bylaw drafting committee with a number of other residential property owners. And I think where we got in the last meeting was a final draft from the committee to then present to the Board of ASPO for their review. After their review, if there are no further revisions, it would eventually come to the property owners or the members of ASPO at the annual meeting for a vote. So we're pretty far along in redrafting the bylaws, but it has to go to the board first for their comment, and then eventually to the community or the membership of ASPO. Does that help?
It helps, but I'm still confused because I know a couple of weeks ago, Charlie did make a comment that this would be a work in progress and would come back to the property owners prior to the annual meeting for other revisions. So but this will go, if it's approved tomorrow, then it will be sent out to ASPO members for their input? You don't know. I'm sorry.
At that point, I'm really not sure, because we've already had input. There had been a survey that had been, and we got a lot of input from a lot of people, and that was considered in drafting the last draft, which will then be presented tomorrow.
Okay, so
I'm
you don't know.
Sandra,
I mean, yeah.
Sandra, you were the secretary at that.
Thank you.
Good morning, this is Sandra. What's happening tomorrow is the final draft, if you will be presented to the board for their approval. After that, it will be posted on the website for further comment. After those are done, then a final will be brought before the membership for their vote and approval, excuse me, at the annual meeting in April. Okay.
Thank you, Sandra.
Other back row, and then we'll come to Mark here.
This is for Russell. Congratulations on a job well done. I'm an old construction pro. I walk the job every day. When they had to dig by hand, a 1920s approach was not figured. Congrats to your guys. And Toby, I was an old paving guy. I wanted to drive the opposite way because I could find the bumps. I was afraid your guys might not take it too carefully. I told Toby earlier what we did was put a coffee cup on the dash, go like hell the opposite way, and we would find every bump in the pavement. I didn't think the guys would appreciate that. Thanks, guys. Great job.
Thank you.
This is a question about, I would say security. We have an alarm company at our house, and we connect with the central station through the cell phone, and we have our communication with our security system is down now because the cell signal coming from the beach tower is been affected by those antennas being at about half as high as they were while they paint the tower. So my question is, if somebody could give some idea when the beach tower would be completed and then those antennas put back on top.
Actually, I think David's going to address that because he was working with that project.
Yeah, the tower is being repainted. Tower is owned by South Island Public Service District. The one suggestion that they gave is sorry, I need to go to the podium. Specifically with your provider, the information South Island Public Service District has passed on is to contact your provider. They may have some options that will help bridge this coverage gap, because you are correct, the temporary tower antennas are considerably lower than what was existing. Related to timing, we do not anticipate that it will be restored back to pre-project conditions until late February, possibly early March.
Other questions? Right here.
Bob Bellion. Just want to thank you. We were at a couple of meetings ago, and my wife mentioned that we had a problem with a street, and it was fixed within a week. So thank you. That was great.
Thank you. Other questions, this gentleman?
Name is Bill Lynn. I think we all agree it's dark here at night. When you redid Plantation Drive and you put the reflectors down, I think it makes it easier to drive, safer, etc. Are you going to do the same with Greenwood when you finish the striping?
Yes, sir, we will.
John?
What is a rice track? Trunk?
Russell? You get to explain it now. Or David.
Yeah, Mr. Henderson was my partner in crime on this one. But rice trunks were used in the state of South Carolina, low country, to raise in lower levels in rice fields, mostly in upland areas of South Carolina. But if you go out into Palmetto Bluff, Belfair, and so on, you'll see these rice trunks. They were historic. They controlled water levels. Sea Pines had in the forest preserve, there was a rice field there. We don't necessarily feel there was a rice trunk, but it's a way to symbolize and acknowledge that there, obviously there was a rice field there. Part of this effort was to, there's a gate valve there at that location. And we feel that with the addition of the rice trunk, obviously adding the historical element will also help the screen, which is a pretty ugly valve. So it's serving two purposes. But again, this is something you'll find all around the low country, and that was used for many centuries to control water levels. The actual trunk itself was actually a wooden, it was the shape of a wooden box that would go between the two gates. What we're actually installing is just the gate, not what they would call the trunk that went between those gates. Building out of wood, essentially it's a wooden pipe that would have went underneath a berm or a roadway or so forth, but we're not performing that aspect of the work. Hope that answers the question though. Sure.
Hi, I'm Dana Guazo, and I live on Sand Fiddler, across from the infamous 40 Sand Fiddler, which still sits there. And I'm on the Land Use Management Committee. So I just wanted to rather than have a question, I wanted to alert property owners that on the both CSA and ASBO boards, there's an agenda item to potentially approve the land use monitor position going from a part-time position to a full-time position. And this is to help make the work of the Land Use Management Committee and the monitor be more proactive. That person's responsibility is to try to monitor properties on sea pines to make sure they don't fall into severe disrepair like the house across the street from me is. And I've been told by many people in sea pines that in every neighborhood there's a property or two that they are really concerned about, that the owners are either just unresponsive, unable, not present, for whatever reason, are unable to and do not maintain their properties. And it really affects the whole community. I can tell you the owner of the home next to 40 Sand Fiddler has been unable to get an offer on his house, which has been on the market for months. So it can be a real problem. So I hope that if you will speak to your board members and encourage them to try to find a way to make that position full-time, it would make a big difference, I think, in sea pines. So thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Other questions? Webinar, let's go to webinar, then we'll come up front.
We have a question from a webinar from property owner Tom Ives. The question is, why doesn't CSA and the Alliance hold a moderated town hall discussion / meeting to openly discuss and debate the points of the Alliance's proposed grand bargain?
I don't think they've requested it. So, it's up to them. I think we would, or CSA members would, but I don't believe that's a request. Barry, do you want to comment?
Sure. I'm Barry Barth. I'm a CSA board member and also a ASPO board member. I think the real issue is that, as many of you know, informal discussions did take place between some CSA board members and the Alliance. The perspective on the question is, it was if it was from an Alliance point of view. I mean, I think an open discussion would have been great from the get-go for both organizations. I really do, and I'm sure the community feels the same way. The differences are significant, and while we took the first steps, Charlie Miner basically took the first steps to initiate a discussion with leadership. And there were 2 meetings. I attended one of them. I was out of town for the other meeting. The other members of CSA and ASPO were there for the second meeting. And from that point on, discussions basically fell apart. We asked initially we presented a rough financial plan that's very similar, I think, to the strategic plan at that point in terms of what the costs were. They indicated they would get back to us. Again, I wasn't there for the second meeting, so I received this information. And then there were, I don't know, Dave, a few weeks before we finally got their plan back, their financial plan back. And basically there were no more discussions. Stu Rodman, who is on the CSA board, was the moderator, the facilitator. I thought he did a great job. There was an attempt to basically try and, bring the two groups together, and it was unsuccessful. So again, that's my point of view. I wasn't there for the second meeting, so that's kind of a third-hand description of what took place at that meeting. I think it would certainly, have been helpful early on. I don't know that it would be helpful at this point. Again, that's my point of view. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Easy ones for Russell, I think. On the timber bridge at Greenwood that you're replacing, you're widening that, I hope, from what it was before.
The one that we're demolishing as we speak, yeah. That will be just as wide as the other two new bridges, which is a standard 8 feet to match the existing leisure trail.
It was less than that before.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. And on the phase 2 of Greenwood, which you said is going to be delayed for some time.
Yes.
I think you have, or not you, the contractor had put in the drainage stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to remain there until?
It does have to remain. Part of our overall permit with the town of Hilton Head requires that tree protection and silt fence to stay in place until we finish stabilization of all the soil in the current project phase. So we cannot remove it at this time until that's all done.
All the stuff except for the phase 2 part also.
Yeah, everything, all the silt protection, both from Club Course Drive to Governor's Road, and from Governor's Road to Plantation, has to stay in place until we finish all the stabilization of the soil in phase 1. So, I don't have a date as to when that will be removed at this time, but it does have to stay up as per the town of Hilton Head. So.
Let me speak a little bit to that. The town permit, which we applied for the permit for the entire road construction, we phased it. Okay, so they're tied together from a permitting perspective. There may be some opportunity, especially if we delay and commit to delay phase 2 to sometime in the future. There's a lot of different thoughts on whether we go forward, and as Russell mentioned, late, probably January to complete it by early spring. And we're still discussing that. So, these decisions will continue to be made and evaluated to determine where we're going from here. We're also waiting on the contractor to come back to us with some additional thoughts on that phasing of phase 2. Okay. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Carol Campbell. I think the person on the webinar was asking more for a public discussion. So that part wasn't answered.
I mean, we're here every month, so we're open to discuss and talk. So here you go.
Well, no, I mean a public discussion between the sides where you can discuss it openly in front of everybody, and we can hear.
They're invited. They're all invited all the time, every month. Come, talk. Let's go. I'm here.
It just would be
we're
nice.
All here.
It'd be very nice to hear both sides at the same time instead of one side and then the other side.
We agree. That's why we're here.
Okay, well, good. I hope then they could come so we can all hear it.
Yes, sir.
My name is Don Miller. I've been an owner and resident here for 25 years. And it's interesting that my question and concern is somewhat mirroring what's being said on the webinar and what the follow-up comment was just now. I feel very conflicted by standing here to talk about anything negative about Sea Pines because for 25 years I've loved it, still love it, will intend to always love it. But as you see it from an owner's perspective and a lack of communication of what's going on and what's true and what's not true, and why do we have to wait till it becomes step 7 of 8 to ask the question, what do you think? By that time, it's almost too late. My experience has been for the last 5, 10 years it's already done by the time they ask the question, what do you think? And my question pertains to the referendum. And this is where the real conflict. There's a lot of things about the referendum I absolutely support, but there are a couple that are just absolutely unacceptable. And maybe it's because they have not been explained or given to the owners to take a look at it. And but the question of being number 7 as an owner, in looking at those 8 steps to go through this referendum, which I generally would support but cannot vote for, I would vote no today to the referendum simply because I lack information. And I think the suggestion of having an open town hall would be very helpful to kind of air the issues. And you say, well, you're here all the time. Yes, you live here. I don't live here. And I usually attend these kinds of meetings via the webinar, just as the first question was. And to the other lady that asked the question about the change in the covenants of ASPO.
The bylaws, yes.
Bylaws,
Yes.
okay. I know nothing about that. And but it doesn't sound like it's very positive towards what the homeowners would be interested in wanting to see happen. But why wait until the 11th hour to hear the response from so many owners? I mean, there's a lot of owners. I mean, we're talking thousands of owners, and they don't know about it.
Well, that's why we're going to be going out with a survey shortly. Realize that we've just completed the strategic plan and approved that. We got direction from the board to bring these terms out, these initial terms out, and we've been communicating through email, letters, gosh, I don't know how many I've sent out, coffees, all of that, and that's what we're here to talk about. So we are here to talk about those things. So it's hard to answer questions that aren't specific. So one of the key things and elements that you have to understand about a referendum is the resort has to approve. Okay, so their interest has to be maintained for them to approve, or we have no referendum. They have that opportunity for amending the 1974 covenants to approve the referendum. So we're trying to get agreement from them, and I think one of our challenges, and maybe the understanding from many groups out there, but the Alliance, is that they don't have agreement from the resort. And without agreement from the resort, it's going to be very difficult. Well, we can't move forward with a referendum. They have to sponsor it, or it has to be by petition, and they have to approve. And that's just the covenants.
But the point is, the owners of the properties here in the plantation, they also need to approve it.
That's correct, yes, which is why we talked about who needs to approve. We have to have 75% approving. I don't know if you're going to approve or not. We're trying to provide as much information for you to make a good decision. And we're here every month. We're on our webinar. We're asking the question of what information you need in addition to that through our survey. And we'll be continuing to do that. This vote isn't happening even this year. This is going into next year before we actually send out ballots. It may be delayed beyond that if we don't have support. And that's our job. I mean, we either get support or we don't have support, and we make the adjustments that we have to make in accordance with either way it goes. We talked about the budget a little bit today. This is assuming there's no referendum. All of these things come out. We can't do those things without the funding. And that's what the referendum is about, is fixing our ills, the things that we have found to be deficient, and trying to create a better environment for all. Now, it is a challenge to communicate to 5,800 property owners, especially 70% of whom don't have this as their primary residence. So we're doing a lot of this via webinar, but as you can see here, we've got 20 people on the webinar. That doesn't help with 5,800. So we're sending letters out to everybody's address, and we're hoping you will all open them and read them and submit questions back so that we can better answer those. But to anticipate every question that actually about 10,000, because you have households out there, people may have, is a real challenge from a communications perspective. But we're doing everything we can with the tools that we have today to try to provide those pieces back out in letters, in writings, in webinars, and in these presentations, and offer the opportunity to come and participate.
Well, I appreciate your effort, but I'm afraid it's not meeting the need as many owners are standing to. The Alliance has been trying to say this. Whether they're doing a very effective job in communicating, they'll have to answer that themselves. But I know I've been following the Alliance. I support the Alliance because of some of these things, but they are not getting answers. And I'm here, and I'd be happy to meet with anyone while I'm in town.
Happy to.
I'll give you a call.
Great.
Thanks.
Perfect. Okay. Christopher.
Thank you, Christopher Clare. Brett, I think the CSA executive is doing a very good job about communicating your perception of the strategic plan. I would suggest that Mr. Miller's question and Mr. Ives' question from the webinar was actually proposing that the directors of CSA and Alliance have a town hall discussion forum, which of course you would participate as executive vice president of CSA. But I think the individuals responsible for the governance of sea pines should step up. I think that's the question. But actually, that's not what I stood up to ask, actually.
Okay.
So I don't wish to further. What I would like to say is that recently, Toby gave a very interesting update on ABDI at the short-term rental committee meeting. And as I think a couple of weeks ago, we agreed that the Toby would actually update property owners, and that hasn't happened. And can I ask you, the second major project, which started a couple of years ago and still going on, is the enterprise-wide software. So the ABDI and the enterprise-wide software are two really critical projects for the management of CSA. And I thought we'd agree that there would be an update for property owners, which would be terrific.
We can do that now. Victoria, you want to give a quick update?
Good morning. I know you've been through this process, and it is, let's just say it's painful. It is very painful. So far, we have implemented the financial package of NetSuite, and that's going along. It's going well. I think it's, like I said, it's a little painful, but it's not going nearly as quickly as I had thought. So as far as ADBI is concerned, we are still moving forward with that. Unfortunately, it's, again, not going as fast as we had hoped. What we are trying to do is take our property owner database, which, as you mentioned, is over, almost 6,000, and getting that into NetSuite, and then NetSuite will talk to ADBI. Whereas now we have all these little silo of, so getting this all to work and getting the owner database to connect and talk is a very difficult process, and we got to get it right. I mean, these are property owner information, so it's just, like I said, just not taking. It's taking a lot longer than we thought, but we are still moving forward, and we're excited about it. Sure.
Hi. Kindly, CSA gave me the Excel spreadsheet which shows the CSA mailing list. Well, it's 6,300 on that mailing list. I've worked my way through the entire mailing list, which has taken many months, and I've checked it back to various public records, as well as ASPO records and other things. And there are numerous errors on the CSA mailing list. I'm just hoping that as it stands, isn't going into NetSuite, and then that's going to be.
No, part of the process is what we call scrub. I'm learning all these new terms. It's called scrubbing the data, which is basically cleaning it up.
Well, it's a hell of a job, and I wish you luck. It's great.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
We have, you've got employees that for over however many years that the system has been in place, different employees, some use the word post office, some use PO, some spell out South Carolina, and so it's totally inconsistent. So it's taking a long time to scrub it.
I think that information is really helpful to people to know. Regarding ABDI, I hope I'm not misrepresenting what you said, Toby, but I'm pretty sure Toby said to the property rental companies that it was the intention that they would be the first to use ABDI, and probably not until April 2019, and that when they saw it, it's very familiar with the existing system in Palmetto Dunes. I think that's right, Toby.
Palmetto Dunes does have ABDI in place. What we are proposing is a little bit of an expansion of that. There's a module called Officer Pulse, which Palmetto Dunes has not implemented. So ours is going to be a little more extensive than Palmetto Dunes, but we are lucky that Palmetto Dunes went through a year before ABDI went completely on board, because there was a lot of differences as to what they thought they were getting as to what they actually got. And by the time they all got together, it was a year. So we are lucky that we have that advantage, that that's already been cleaned up by the time it's getting to Sea Pines. Yes.
Who has it? Let's go here, then back to the gentleman again. So David, where'd David go? There we go.
Hi, I have a question for Toby as well. At one of the past meetings, he talked about the, I don't know how else to say it, the prescription drug drop-off and maybe sharps drop-off. I was just wondering if we could get an update on that.
Glad you brought that up. I had a conversation with the sheriff's office yesterday. We are trying to schedule a plan here. Unfortunately, we should have publicized it. Last month, they did one here locally on Hilton Head. But Sea Pines is so big, it would be nice to have it here in addition to maybe prescription drugs and sharps, that we would do ammunition. They've done firearms before. We don't want that stuff thrown in garbage cans. So we are. It's a date scheduling, because we have to bring DHEC in to involve them with this process as well. So it's just unsolicited. You can just drop your stuff off. There's no questions asked, and they dispose of it. So stay tuned. We'll come back to you with a date.
Thank you.
Here we go. Amanda, gentleman, in the yellow.
Oh, okay.
Dave, I'll be back. Nope. Next one.
Two things. I'm Lori Allenbach. I live on Governor's Road. So the first thing I'd like to do is to say thank you to everyone who slowed down, who stopped to let me get out of the driveway, who watched me go to the mailbox and was so kind. I really wasn't inconvenienced that much because of all of you. So thank you. The second is that I'm part of a group called the Concerned Majority of Sea Pines Homeowners. I believe that this group is every bit as large as the Alliance, and that we have just as great a stake in the future of our community and this referendum as they do. So that if going forward, we do have any type of public forum, I definitely think that our group should also be included.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
I hear you say that you want to get the information out, and I certainly believe you. I also hear people say that they don't have information. As the administrator, the moving force, what have you, wouldn't it be appropriate for you to try to arrange this town hall, to try to get the information out so everybody knows where we stand, and then we have better information and better results?
Yes, we are trying to get the information out. We spend hours, our staff, weekly, rewriting and publishing and sending emails and letters and communications, posting on the web, having community forums, had a community forum with realtors, happy to have community forums with all interested to sit here and go through these things. I think board members want to do that. I cannot see people not wanting to do that. It's a challenge to get people to participate and to open their mail and read the letters. Communication is a two-way street.
People have asked for a town hall. Can you not arrange
That's the first one I heard.
Well, we've heard these three people here this morning.
I think that's great. That's what we're here for, to hear about those
Would you
things.
try to arrange that?
We'll invite them.
Would you try to arrange that? Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, invite them. They're invited. Well, we can have a separate one. We'll invite all the groups.
Brett, we have a question on the webinar.
Yes.
Just a statement on the webinar. So this is from property owner Karen Weiner. She says that I agree a community forum is a perfect venue for the Alliance to discuss its views should they decide to attend. She's asking if we do that type of forum, would it be available for property owners who are not able to attend in person to view via webinar?
Sure.
Certainly. And then she follows up by saying CSA is meeting the communications need from her perspective.
I mean, we're all out in trying to get information out. With the time that we have, we actually have other jobs too, but we do spend an inordinate amount of time trying to do that very mission, and are happy to do additional things that the community feels are important. I mean, forums are great, and this is a forum today. That's how we hear about these things, and we can follow up on these things. So, the invitation is open.
One more question from the webinar really quickly. The question is from David Harris. Question is to you, Brett. Brett, are you saying that unless the Sea Pines Resort agrees with the content of the proposed referendum, that it will not be voted upon by members?
No.
So make sure.
No, they have to approve. So there's two ways for a referendum to occur, right? Okay, one, the resort can bring it to the community in the 1974 covenants. The resort can bring a referendum. The other method is through a petition. Both of those must then be approved by the resort per the covenants. Okay, so they are an integral part of any referendum that can be brought forward and or approved and incorporated into the covenants. Well, let's go in order here. So the gentleman here, and then we'll go to Christopher.
David, I'm sorry.
Because we have a couple of, and then the gentleman right back here. That's right.
Hi, my name is Dick Clark. First of all, I'll start out by saying I fully support the referendum. However, hearing the things that I'm hearing and from friends that I disagree with and they disagree with me about this, it seems like, for me, thinking that for a forum to be good and serve its purpose, both sides would have to be prepared to present information, facts, that would, refute or... yeah. Oh, that makes a difference. I'm sorry for everyone else. I'm not going to repeat it, but it seems like there's just a basic disagreement. One side says the trolley costs this much to operate. The other side, CSA, says this. And some things like that. Just come prepared. I don't do any social media, so I'm totally naive probably about some of these disagreements. But from what I'm told from my friends they say this, we say that. In other words, it needs to be each side needs to come prepared to present information, and so it's just not like a shouting match or people walk out and leave the room because they're not talking to us. I think that would be helpful. I mean, I am so happy to live here, proud to live here, and I want this infrastructure to be good to keep that up. And I don't know how we can do it without this, but if other people somehow feel like they're not getting right information, then I think a town hall would be good, but both sides need to come and try to just share the information where these points of contention are. But thank you.
Thank you. Then to Christopher, if you would.
I just have a comment rather than a question. I think there was a town hall meeting of some sorts. I don't know how many people here came to meet the candidates night, but the people from Alliance were here. and they presented what they thought was the right thing to do, and people going for the board presented what they thought was the right thing to do. I think the major issue that is between the two groups is the source of the funding. I interpreted, and my interpretation is my reality, right? So I may be wrong, that they want to raise more money from commercial entities than they're now paying. I'll put my CPA hat on for a minute. After the meeting, I went up and asked some of the Alliance people. I said, I agree with you. Commercial entities should be paying more. And here's where I hope nobody goes out and slices the tires on my car. But I said, how many people rent their homes and file, because it's required by the government, a Schedule E, which says I'm running a business. I therefore said, I understand I'm in a resort. I want to be in a resort. I know there's short-term guests in the resort, which we call renters. But if you are renting your home and you have a renter and you're required by law to file a Schedule E, get my CPA hat on, why aren't you considered a business and tax that as a business and raise money? The Alliance didn't answer that question. They didn't want to answer the question, and they said they do not consider a special fee from CSA for that privilege as part of their requirements.
Thank you. Let's go, no, hold on. Christopher's next, then we'll go back to this gentleman, then all the way to the back.
Thank you, Brett. Brett, I think Article 5.3 of the 1974 Covenants, perhaps the wording could be a bit clearer, but I think you'll find that the resort has to approve the referendum, and then the resort has the authority to actually veto the results of the referendum. And so I think David Harris on the webinar was asking, does the resort effectively have an input and control over the wording of the referendum? I think that's what his question was. And I think the answer is yes.
Yes, they have to agree. The simple answer is they have to agree.
And,
you know, we don't have the covenants here, so I'm not going to get to the quotes of the covenant specifically, but agreement is specified.
And to the last speaker's point, I have no idea who he spoke to the Alliance, and I'm certainly not speaking on their behalf. But if you look at the covenants, you'll find it's quite clear what is commercial as compared to what is a property owner. And the answer to his question is actually in the covenants, and the distinction is followed very carefully and conscientiously by CSA.
Thank you. This gentleman, I think, still have a question? No? Okay, all the way there.
Yes, I'm Stanton Boyer. I do rent and I do file a Schedule E, and I did address somebody claiming that we should be claiming that we run a business. I said as a response, I'd love to claim my property as a business so I can get 250 free gate passes, so I can pay the same assessment that commercial businesses pay and all those other benefits. The covenant clearly says rental property shall not be defined as a business. You want to follow the covenants? You follow the covenants.
Others? Questions, comments? Dana, and then we'll go back.
Hi, Dana Guazo. I'm not going to talk about any of that. I'm going to ask a question of Toby. In your presentation, Toby, you talked about the service providers and the damage that they do on streets and properties and how that's going to be monitored more carefully, I guess, in the future, and that you are working on that. Could you please clarify, is that going to be the responsibility of land use management, or is it security? Where's that going to lie?
My plan would be that the land use monitor would handle that.
So that's an additional workload
correct.
On that person. And how many hours a week do you project that that's going to take?
Currently, one of our utility companies has 16 subcontractors working inside of Sea Pines.
So how is that going to be possible for a land use monitor to do that?
Well,
with all the other workload? that person has
Personally,
to do.
I don't think the digging of the roadway is a security function. So it really would be I wouldn't consider that to be a security function. If it's overseeing CSA property, currently building a house, the land use monitor photographs the area before and after to make sure that it is restored back to its original site if it's CSA property. That would, to me, would be a function of the land use monitor. But there is an
Maybe
application.
we need two people for land use monitor.
Well, there is an
I'm not
application-
disagreeing that we need it.
There is an
I'm just saying
application
right
moving
now,
forward
yeah.
that currently both myself, the security department, and the maintenance department is actually inspecting, meeting with the contractors before and after. So we are currently doing that.
Yeah. No, I'm not disagreeing it needs to be done. I'm just I'm wrestling with the challenge of the 20 hours a week, even 40 hours a week that the land use monitor has to
The
monitor
current use of the land
6,000
monitor
property homes.
is not
plus-
enough.
Yeah, it's
Because
not.
there is functions that are taking place inside the security department that is an ARB function and a land use monitor function, not a security function.
I agree. And there are volunteers who are doing land use monitoring as well, unpaid.
That's usually how we find out about stuff. Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Back up here, and then we'll go back over there.
I think this is easy, just a timing question, I guess, on the referendum. I'm fuzzy on it, some other people maybe also. The referendum would happen next year, so I think you're talking about the 2020 budget, is that right? It would impact the 2020
it depends on the referendum. So the language of the referendum is still under development. Okay, it's going to have to be determined, but right now the intention would be to have a way, if it passes, to prorate it for portions of it for next year. That's just what you will see, I believe, unless it comes out. So again, we're talking about very broad terms when we talk about this. We still have to get agreement from the resort on the terminology. We'd like to get that in advance so that we're not having to come back and ask them in arrears about permission on the referendum. So there's still a lot of work that is going to be done, which is why we're moving into next year.
And the way we stand right now, then, when the assessment notices come out in December, they would not include the $300.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions, gentlemen?
I think the gentleman back there misunderstood my comment. My comment was, or meant to be, why don't they look at everything, at the Alliance that is, at all sources of potential revenue, whether it's owners, whether it's businesses, whatever it is, and say, hey, I won't use the word business, I'll use the word operation. There's rental operations going on in Sea Pines. Is the rental operation another potential source of revenue some way, somehow?
Is that a question? Is a rental? Well, it already is, quite frankly. I mean, we've been gate fees, the covenant amendments are different than the gate policy amendments. So they require different bodies or partners or people and entities to change gate fee policy. Depending on what the change is, that includes the resort and CSA. It may also include Sea Pine Center. That's why we have agreements with those parties about gate fee changes. Covenant changes are another matter. And what we're talking about, depending on who you're talking to and what their current day's, take on thing is, everything is, it can change. And, trying to get to specific information, as we just talked about, from a referendum perspective, we've got to get specific information out to you before you're going to vote. And we are still early in the education process before you're going to vote. So these things, we're going to test the waters with a survey to find out how much you know, so we can, and what you know about, so we can better determine what we need to focus on, quite frankly. I mean, that's our objective, is to try to figure out where we are in our first survey. And, if everybody says, I understand it, which I don't anticipate, but if everybody says, yes, go, we'll go. If what I anticipate is going to happen, we're going to have a lot of questions, and we're going to have to figure out how to address those questions and provide that information to everybody that's going to be voting to the extent that they want to vote. One of our questions is, are you going to vote? Because that's one of our challenges, quite frankly. You know, generally we get 2,400 people that participate out of almost 6,000. That's a challenge. We're growing that because of the communications that we are putting out, and we want people to participate. But in the end, you decide. 75% of you who vote will decide this, or 25 plus 1 will decide this. Gentleman back here.
75%, is that of eligible voters, or is that of those who vote?
Those who vote.
Okay.
But they got to be eligible too.
Right.
Okay. Just so you know.
It's a lower hurdle than the first one.
Okay.